Hello, folks. Today we have a very special guest. In my eyes, I have a lot of respect for this gentleman. He is a modern Runemaster, Kaedrich Olsen. I hope I spelled your name correctly. Kaedrich. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. A couple of years ago, I have also checked out his book, and I was greatly impressed by his book. Very innovative book, and also his YouTube channel has inspired me also in some experiments of my own. So, Salon Siegel Kunibert. And guys, during this live session, we will have also interaction with you folks. If you have valid questions to address Kaedrich or me, but mainly Kaedrich because he is the main guest, feel free to do so. Be well advised that any questions here are going to be answered to our best possibility. And more than this, be very aware that this gentleman here has a very extensive experience in the paranormal field, has a very extensive experience with energy work, with the runes. So you can actually ask very in-depth questions. Usually our viewers here and the followers of this channel, the majority of them are occult practitioners. We don't have really random people coming or going, but very dedicated practitioners. For example, Kunibert, he's a very dedicated practitioner also. And he would like to ask you a few questions for sure. Anyway, so what is in your view the syntagma or the expression that someone is a rune master? What does this involve in your view?
It's an interesting question. I think everyone's going to have their own unique take on what the runes are, their own understanding. But to be qualified as a rune master, I think it will take years of study. Because the runes are not that easy to understand for just in the general, but it's going to take years of study in the original language. It's also, there are different qualities of people I would consider to be rune masters. Let's say R.I. Page. Her books are great on descriptions of the runes, on the depictions of the rune scripts, but she flat out does not believe in the magical work of the runes at all. To her, they are just a linguistic tool, just a writing tool, and that's it. However, I would still consider her kind of a rune master because her studies are so extensive in what the runes were, how they were used, that sort of thing. Then we go to the complete opposite of the spectrum. Of course, we go to Stephen Flowers, aka Edward Thorson, who has a PhD in Germanic studies, but he understands the literary role of runes as well as the magical role of runes. And so I think if anybody fits in between those two ends of the spectra that have a good, clear understanding of the language of the runes and the history of the runes and the many different applications of it, then why not? That will work.
Okay. And for example, how would you define or recommend, or better said, what is your recommendation for daily practice when it comes to the runes?
For daily practice when it comes to the runes, I'm going to think about different levels of experience when it comes to magical workings and magical practices. For the absolute new beginner, pick one rune at a time and then go through each rune day by day. Study what the rune meant to the ancients, what the definition of the word is, how the ancient people would have seen that rune, and then ponder what that would be in modern times, and then take it a step further on what that rune would mean to you personally in your life. So, for example, Uruz, we know is the ancient European bison, the aurochs. We know to the ancient people that it dealt with a strength, with a primal energy, that it was also an initiation of rights into manhood. And in today's world, that could be, physical prowess. It could be physical strength. It could be willpower. It could be the strength of willpower. And then for an individual, like for me, my strength is I go lift in the gym. My strength is I have a mission to complete, and then I will find the energy to sometimes bullheadedly charge into that mission and make sure things get done, right or wrong, but they get done. And so that is maybe a beginner level work of working with the runes, is to tap into the ancient things, what it means today, what it means to you, and then go through them, maybe not every day, but every few days, pick a new rune and contemplate it and realize that your understanding of that rune is going to change over time. It's not going to sit still. It's not going to be the same thing. And your understanding of Urus today is not going to be the same understanding you have a year from now. And all the time, my understanding of each of the runes changes. And as you progress, I would definitely start working more in the ritual aspect of runes, doing Galder, singing the runes, learning where to intone the different vowels inside the body, connecting with your own intuition as well as your own sense of will, so that you can learn to project those runes as transformative tools. I don't recommend using runes as divination tools, but magical transformative tools, absolutely. And so as you learn to sing the runes, and you're pairing your intention of the runes with the vibration that comes into manifestation, that would be the next level. And then even beyond that, I've got a ritual that I put together that I call Galdrablot, which uses different aspects of Norse lore and plugs it into the framework of the Lesser Banishing Rite of the Pentagram.
Wow. Okay. Interesting to discuss, for sure.
Oh yeah, I've been teaching this for a few years, and I'm putting together some online work with that. I've got music that I've written and created for this ritual, and it's been professionally mastered. It's just me sitting down and putting together the online training program. But this is a ritual that once you understand it, it's a pretty complex ritual, but once you understand it, to do this twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, so that it aligns your whole being, every part of your soul, your psyche, your body, your being, every part of you becomes aligned with the higher workings of the runes in this way. But that would still be maybe a more advanced work. But
okay.
I don't know.
If someone here would want to learn the ritual from you, how would they get to you?
Reach out to me anywhere. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, look for my name. I've got a website, kaedrich.com. There's a contact form there. I've got some stuff on there that people can download and work with. I've got a training manual that's a PDF to teach how to do this thing, as well as the song. And as soon as I figure out how to put together the online training for that one, I'll be making that available for people to go through every process of it, because every step of this ritual is complex.
So this ritual is not publicly available right now?
Not publicly available, but I've taught it in person to many people.
Good to know, folks. Okay, good to know. Are you using cardinal direction works in your rituals?
Yep. I always start at the north. In this ritual, for example, we do 4 trees that are in the lore. In the north is Yggdrasil. Then we go to, to the east, where we have Mimimather, the tree of Mimir.
Okay, nice.
To the south is Lyrather, where in the Grimnismal it talks about all of the different things that are living off of this tree. So it's a tree of life. And then to the west, we have Mjoltvidr, the tree of measures.
This is very nice. I love how it sounds.
Yep. And so all of those 4 trees create the sacred grove for you to have sacred workings inside of.
Wow, nice. With trees. Many people are doing it with the Norse gods, basically, or with the worlds, or with the 9 worlds. But doing it with the trees, I never thought of this, to be honest.
Yeah, sacred groves were an ancient place for the ancestors to do their worship and their practice in.
Yeah, and you got my interest with this ritual, to be honest.
And then the other part of the cardinal directions that we do is when we get to working with the Val, the ascended ancestors. To the north, we call in the Einherjar. To the south, we call the Valkyrier. To the east is the Diar, which are mentioned in the Heimskringla, which were the initiates of Odin, who he taught the magic and the leading and teaching and the guiding of people.
Wow.
And so those are the Diar. And then to the west, we call in the Disir.
It makes total sense to the west. It makes total sense.
The tree of measures, Mjoltvidr. in the west. So we call in the Desir for that. And to the east with Mimir, with the tree of the mind and the learning and the teaching. That's where we call in the DR, the guides, the leaders, the teachers.
Okay, okay. But about the intermediate cardinal directions, have you approached those in the workings?
Yeah, just in those ways of setting the trees and then the gates.
For example, in the framework of cardinal directions that I or some other persons use, we are placing the Desir at the southwest, but still it's west. Southwest. Yeah, south. For example, if we are going to look at some comparison between traditions, the ghost gates, northeast and southwest. And in southwest, there in the many other traditions that use the 10 cardinal directions, in the southwest, it's always about the ancestors, it's always about trials, about karma or dharma. So it's around, but if you want to simplify the ritual and go only with the main cardinal points, it's just sounds very correct, your assignment. Very good, in my humble opinion. I would use it. I will surely use it for sure.
I'll send you a PDF of the training manual or the little guidebook on how to do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Folks, so if you have questions, do not be shy. Give it a try. Okay, now it's your chance at romance with Mr. Runemaster here. So, what is your opinion on seeing gods as literally beings or as archetypes from our own being? Is there a middle way between them, or they are both real at the same time? What do you think about this?
It's an interesting question because I do have a complex answer for that one. I've got my second book is 80% of the way done, needs a bit of rewrites, but I have a whole chapter on there dedicated to 3 different Odins. The first Odin we talk about, and this will answer your question, the first Odin we talk about is a human being. The human being that we find in the lore that was a leader, that was a teacher, who had exceptional magical abilities. But because he was able to influence so many people in the stories that were told of him, he went through a process of apotheosis and ascended to his own personal godhood. But those stories that have been told from one generation to the other verbally, and they got enhanced and modified, augmented every time it was told, led to the collective belief that this entity, this higher being than human, existed and had certain powers and certain thoughts and certain minds. And this collective belief in the entity of Odin gave rise to an egregore that is very real, very powerful, very wise, very good to work with, but it is a collective created entity by humanity. Then there is some being that I can trace through the lore of different cultures, who traverse the globe, sometimes in a body, sometimes not, who does the little poke of waking up people to teach them that there's more than this physical reality, that they can wake up to ascend into a higher state of being. And the lore talks about this one, again, in the, not the Grim the Small, but the Ginegilfing from the Prose Edda, when it talks about Odin traveling all over the world, teaching the things that he needs to teach, and that the people in all of these different cultures called him a name that they best understood him by. We see the same exact thing going on with Hermes Trismegistus. We see the same thing going on in the way early days with a being called Lucifer, not the Christian absolute evil entity, but a wise being that teaches people, that wakes up. We see this with Prometheus. We see the same exact concept of an entity traversing different cultures, teaching this higher level knowledge, which only became forbidden in the Middle Ages by the Catholic Church and other religions, other Abrahamic religions, but they were teaching this higher level knowledge. And so this is the third type of being, whether it's an extra dimensional, interdimensional being, I don't know, but it is something that can occupy human minds to wake them up. And so to me, this is the 3 different kinds of deities out there: the ascended human being, that we all can attain that level of existence, There is the egregore of a collectively created being, and then there is some already high-level entity that exists in the subtle, non-physical realms that can influence our minds, our spiritual and energetic well-being.
Okay, that is a very powerful and very complete answer. Thank you very much. What do you think? And this is one of my what I'm asking right now. It's really a personal question from me, and I'm really interested at the personal level about it. I know this. I would, if I knew the answer to this, I wouldn't answer it so freely in public, but I would give an answer to the extent that is possible. What do you think about, and what do the artifacts presented in the lore, what do you think about those? Are they symbols of spiritual or spiritual force? For example, the Mjolnir, the Gungnir, and other artifacts presented in the lore, do they have a more deeper spiritual meaning? For example, for me, the Mjolnir is a way to work with energy, and the way in which, for example, Mjolnir was created by two dwarves, or two dwarves, with the help of Loki indirectly. For me, that is a recipe to actually create Mjolnir at an energetic level. But this could also be true about the necklace of Freya. This could also be true about many other artifacts. So what is your opinion on this?
They are symbolic representations of parts of these deities, ways that we can connect with them. Like the hammer is a protective tool that can be destructive or it can be blessing. But it's a way of working with Thor to connect with Thor's energy. It's a tool that we can use to connect with the deities, like a spear, to connect with the wisdom and the guidance that Odin gives. But more so, the tales are a little bit more of a deeper insight to spiritual workings. The story, when Thor wakes up and he loses his hammer, he instantly blames Loki. Loki goes and gets the falcon coat, flies over the worlds and finds a giant has Thor's hammer. And they eventually dress Thor up as Freya because the giant insists on marrying Freya. And Loki and Thor, dressed as Freya, go back and throughout the feast and get to the marriage ceremony. Thor gets his hammer back. This is exactly a telling of shamanic soul retrieval.
Yes.
He has stolen part of Thor's soul, and through the falcon coat is a shamanic journey, and then the trickery and the guile to win Thor's soul back.
True. This makes a lot of sense indeed.
Yes. So these tales are symbols. This is where I kind of differ with some of the scholars. Some of the scholars will do a great job of interpreting literally the Eddas, but they have no mystical mindset. They have absolutely no understanding of the mysticism that is embedded in the lore. And so they translate it and go, nope, we don't know what this is. And it's gone. And then somebody comes along like me, who has a little bit of an understanding of the language, but a deeper understanding of magic and mysticism and esoteric practices. And I can come back in and say, this is really what they're talking about. Such as Jormungandr, the great world serpent that encapsulates the world and eats his own tail, comes to us from Western European esotericism as the Ouroboros. It's the exact same thing, the universal mysteries.
Yes, indeed. And also, if we look at the serpent who eats its own tail, if we look at the description of the Kundalini energy from the Tantras, at one point the Kundalini raises up and it meets itself in our own body. When it raises up, it meets itself when it's descending. So basically, it bites its own tail in the lower chakra yet again.
Here we come to the microcosmic orbital breathing.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I have also combined the runes with some Taoistic practices, and they can be quite powerful. I mean, this can be, for example, like the middle pillar that some Western magicians are doing. Middle pillar can also be done with the runes in certain ways. But what I have observed is personally that every chakra or every energetic center has a multitude of runes that correspond with it. And there is not a single rune that you can work with on a single chakra. You can work with 3 or even 4 runes on a single chakra. And if we are to look at, for example, at the petals of the chakra from the Sanskrit kalas, we will see that all the Sanskrit alphabet is inscribed on the petals, basically center, left, right, up, and the small petals also. And this is how I see the runes also.
Nice. So what I can do here is I'll give you a little bit of an insight how I work with runes at sort of the chakra, the middle pillar level. And this will also help to answer Kunabert's question about a unique technique for working with the runes that's safe to the public. What I've done is looking at the Elder Futhark. There are 7 vowel runes, like Urus for the U, Othala for O, that sort of thing. And I do assign 1 rune for each one of the 7 chakra points, but they're only the vowel runes. And so we started at Urus at the base of the spine with U, then we go to O, and then Ewaz in the solar plexus, Yera in the chest for Yi, Anzus in the throat, Ewaz at the forehead, Isa at the top of the head. Now what this helps me to do is if I take a word like Alu starts with A in the throat, Urus at the base of the spine. And I can move that energy going, Au. Or we do Laukas, Laukas, Alu. And that way I can move the energy through the body when I'm galdering the runes, just because of that vowel sounds. And I can take Old Norse rune inscriptions, or I can take the poems from the Poetic Edda, and then convert that into the galder by moving the vowel sounds throughout the body.
Okay. So Nelson says here, cheers to the 2 of you watching and enjoying at work. Thank you very much, Nelson, for your presence here. And you other folks here present, please do not be shy and ask your questions. For example, how did you start? How did you find out the runes? Did you have some previous spiritual experience? Did you have some initiation or some spontaneous experience that has driven you to embrace the runic path more? So how was your start on the path, if I'm allowed to go?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents were always open and accepting of me exploring different spiritual traditions, different religions, that sort of thing. The basement of my house that I grew up in was like a library. There were just books everywhere, just insane amount of books on every sort of subject you could imagine. And I came across Manly P. Hall's Secret Teaching of All Ages. It was a big, huge, thick book. But at 11, 12 years old, I was deeply engrossed in that book. I was studying it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. As a couple of years progress, I came across a book called The Way of Weird by Brian Bates and the Book of Runes by Ralph Blum, all at the same time. And it just clicked. And I remember reading in Manly P. Hall's book about the Brotherhood of Odin and the rites that they went through. Yeah. And it just the pieces just like made so much sense to me that I realized that from my studies that all of these mystical traditions were saying the same things over and over and over. They just had different words and different processes, and that I needed to choose one path so I could learn this one path as a control group. So I understood it completely, and I chose that to be the runes. And so I delved completely deeply into the runes, absorbing as much as I could, learning Old Norse, learning as much of the language as I could, studying as many of the scholarly texts that I could about this tradition, and then starting to apply it. I've always had another foot, like in the paranormal working. I've always had spiritual guides that I call the whisperers that have led me through everything. And if I resist what they're trying to teach, they'll literally drop the stuff right in my lap and force me to look at it and deal with it. And it's just been years and years and years of working with these guides, trying not to believe the stuff that they're telling me, thinking it's my own imagination making this stuff up, and then going to apply it and test it and then teach it and having my eyes go, wow, there's something here. This is real. This is authentic. And that's what led to my book, Runes for Transformation. That's what's leading me to the next steps of working, like the Galdra and a lot of the other stuff that I'm doing right now. So it was just really my parents being open to me exploring, me listening to the whisperers and doing the deep dive into the literature, into the language, and to the culture, and then trying to understand how it applies to us today.
Okay. For example, what do you think about, for example, some traditions in the world? The most long-standing tradition from an esoteric point of view is the tantric one, and they have a system of initiation. And I believe that in the days of living Odin, this is just a humble personal opinion, okay? In the days of living Odin, there were also some kind of, beyond the oral initiation, there was also some kind of initiation rite that happened there. And some people say, well, that initiation rite could have been death and rebirth rite, a rite of entrance. What are your thoughts on certain initiations?
Yep. If we go back to the Sigurd Rifumal, where we see Sigurd rescuing the Valkyrie Sigurdrifa from the Ring of Fire, and she teaches him initially about the runes. You know, they're on bear paw, on glass, all these different things. She's telling him where to find the runes. Then as she scratches the runes onto a twig and then scrapes them off into the beer for him to drink, that is his runic initiation, his awakening.
Wow. Okay.
So it's absolutely in the lore. More pointedly, I'm trying to convince people that the stuff that we carve and the stuff that we stain are just staves. They're not the runes. Those are just like what you see on the wall behind me, in the chalk on the wall. Those are staves. They're not actually runes. The runes were created in the time before time. They are a vibration of consciousness. And they are a vibration of consciousness that connects us through what we understand as sound, like Aum and Alu, hallelujah. We understand these as sacred sound. But they are a way for our subtle parts of our minds to connect to the subtle layers of reality. They are a type of energy, a type of vibration that we can interpret as sound. And that understanding of the runes, for example, us talking here and transmitting information, is the rune Anzus.
Yep.
Not the stave that we draw and that we color, but that is Anzus. So if you are working with runes at the energetic and the intentional level, is what the Sigurd Rifumal calls Hugrunar, mind runes, or Malrunar, speech runes, the runes that you speak out loud. Those are the essence of the runes that we understand. And instead of carving them onto wood and then scraping them into a beer to drink, as you intone them, as you understand their meaning and their energy, and you incorporate the runic energy into your own subtle being and your own subtle body, that is the best level of runic initiation that you can undertake.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. And for example, we are expressing right now the rune Ansus, and because we are expressing it together, it could be Ehwaz with Ansus maybe, or Manas with Ansus.
Manas and Ansus, absolutely agree. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I teach when I'm in a class teaching runes. It's Manas of the people gathered and Anzus of teaching it.
Beautiful. I also worked with the runes, and I see them like divine radio waves in which I tune in or out of. For example, in the works of Kaedrich Olsen, there are some works there with runes in which you can actually connect to certain constellations, or certain using the runes to connect with different stars or different phases of the moon.
Interesting.
Yeah, and these works I've done with great success, to be honest, and they do work. For example, I think this information is quite accurate, but if it's not, I apologize. I have bumped into it many times, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. Although I say, who knows? For example, Kaedrich Olsen He was a rune master from the days of Kumar. He was contemporary with Aleister Crowley, and he was also friends with him. He spoke about the cross constellation or the swan constellation. And he said that from there, a big amount of radio waves is felt. Dozens of years before NASA identified that constellation emitting radio waves, this Rune Master identified it dozens of years before with his own spiritual practices. So you can use the runic work in unimaginable scales, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even, for example, if us right now, in my humble opinion, we express runes, and that's for sure. Who knows what else we express that we are not aware of, to be honest. Countries also have their own runes.
Yes.
Countries, geographic locations, and stuff like this. For example, there is a country that can represent in the world, let's say, still the rune Ansus, and the geographic location of that country, it's more like an Uruz type of emanation, for example. And you can look at the country, the culture, the geographic location, and look at it as a bind rune.
Yes, I will go so far as to say that Ostara, the Germanic goddess of fertility, is exactly that. She was a geographical deity, collectively created entity. Whether we want to consider God, goddess, that sort of thing, maybe. But I would say what's not a Thurs, but maybe a type of Jotun. Because I think the Jotun are the giants of nature and the natural world that we can work together with, that we can work peacefully together with. Thurs, though, we can't. Thurs are all about anger, violence, and destruction.
Oh.
But the Jotnar, I think, are great. And I think Ostara may have been that type of a collective created Jotnar. And I totally agree with it. Certain cultures will have an egregore that represents them, and certain countries absolutely will have an egregore. Even businesses, like when I work at Ritual Craft, as a local shop that I work and teach in, there is an egregore, like a goddess type overlooking that shop. But it is a creation of the people who work there, of the people who own it, and of the customers who come there, who have a collective agreement on what this place is and what it's all about. And she's got a unique energy. She's got a unique intelligence. She's very beautiful. And I think the same thing applies for geographic regions, for countries, for subcultures. There is an egregore that helps unify and connect with everybody.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And this is like a work in progress, actually. It's not there yet. And it's like, from what I see, from a runic perspective and alchemical perspective, I see like an evolution. Even the gods evolve and grow. And even us as a collective mind, we evolve and grow towards each other, building bridges. Let's go to a question here. Do you work with other sets beside the Elder Futhark? Interesting. If so, could you give some insight regarding the peculiarities of each set? Whoa, that's quite a huge question, Kunibert.
Yeah, it's true. I do work with the younger Futhork. The second book that I keep hinting at is actually based on the younger Futhork. I teach a class on the younger Futhork. And the way to look at the younger Futhork is really a little bit interesting. Is in the elder, we've got happy runes like Wunyo, for example, the joy and the happiness of Wunyo. It's gone when you get to the younger. There is no happiness in the younger. Kenaz for the elder is all about that knowledge, that applied skill, the forge, that sort of thing. When you get to the younger, it is the abode of mortification. It is the disease, the ulcer fatal to children. A lot of the happy, positive descriptions of the elder are gone when it comes to the younger. Part of that is a reflection of the culture shift. At the time when we went from the elder to the younger, food and resources got a lot more scarce. Life got a lot harder there. That's when the mini ice age kind of settled in. And so the description of the runes at that time are reflective of that.
Ah,
However, the first two ites of that are representing those hardships and those ordeals that you have to go through, to the point where it's almost like the first ite is an ite of initiation, of waking up, of going into this one. The second ite is an ite of ordeal and all of the challenges that you have to face and go through, where the third ite is actually an ite of ascension. And I'll go into a little bit of detail here because I think it's important for our audiences. And I think the people who come back and view this one, this will give them something to think about and ponder.
that's for sure.
This correlates to some Western European esoteric traditions. If we look at Tyr, the rune Tyr, about focus, discipline, the masculine forces, this is thelema. This is purpose. This is your higher spiritual attainment of what you should be focused on and disciplined to achieving. Bjarkan is your resources to achieve that. It's the feminine forces. And this is agape, that higher level of love that you can use to achieve that one. The next rune is Mother, your physical place here in the world, your physical reality, the salt of the earth. So it is the salt, the alchemical salt is Mother.
Wow.
I'm going
Okay.
to skip Loger, and I'm going to go straight to Ear. Ear deals with the dead, with the spiritual realms, with the numinous qualities of things. So therefore, that's sulfur. That is
Ah,
the
okay.
sulfur. Now, in between that is the flow state where you go from the physical to the spiritual and back and forth. And that flowing in between is alchemical mercury. And so if we look at those
Very
five
deep.
rooms,
Very
those
deep.
ites,
Yes,
is
yes.
all about that spiritual growth and evolution to that higher state of being, from the physical man to the spiritual being, from salt into sulfur.
Indeed. Very deep way of seeing this, to be honest. I'm very honored to hear you speak about this on this channel, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yeah, because this is, guys, this is high esoteric knowledge, and I'm very grateful. I'm really, really, really grateful, honestly. And what do you think? Practicing, working with alchemy, using the runes, at what level? What is the limitation of the body? How much can the physical body be transmuted? Working and looking at the runes in this way that you have expressed.
The way I try to look at this one is there's a common New Age saying that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, or that you aren't the body, you don't have a soul, you are a soul that has a body. I throw all of that away.
Okay.
We are human beings and spiritual beings having a dynamic experience. What happens to one happens to the other. So if you boost your spiritual well-being, you're boosting your physical well-being. You boost your physical well-being, you boost your spiritual well-being. And there is a limitation to what the physical body can do. And this is my own experience, and I'm definitely learning new things, open to new things. I do think as long as we exist in the physical realms, we have to abide by the physical world laws, like gravity, like electromagnetism, inertia. All of these sorts of things exist within physical law. Some things do seem to transmute that one, but I don't know. However, I do think you do get to a certain state of spiritual evolution, which is beyond the body, where you can create a coherence of the soul, which the body gets to a certain point and the body's there as best as it can be. I don't know entirely where I stand on these concepts of the body transmuting into a rainbow, and that the body doesn't exist, that there is just now an energetic being. I haven't seen it personally. I've only heard tales of it, and I don't know anybody who has seen somebody transmute physical into energy states of being. However, I have seen souls transmute into a higher state of being, and they no longer need the physical body to exist. And sometimes they do continue to exist within the physical body and the limitations thereof. But there is a certain point where that dynamic construct between the spirit and the soul, the body, can break, where you no longer need the body, but the soul can ascend to a higher state of being as an energy being, no longer needing the physical state of the body. But I think the body is still bound to the physical laws of this reality. You know, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We are the augmentation of the dust. Therefore, the body returns to the dust. And it's our responsibility to learn how to transcend beyond the needs of having a physical body.
Okay. So basically, we renounce the lower needs for the higher needs of the spirit.
Yes.
Like Odin did on the tree.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are some certain sects, for example, the Bektashi order, that uses a type of chanting together with mudras to really impress on the physical body actual transmutations. Even they can even be felt at a biochemical level. And some people even said that obtaining the philosopher's stone, of course, the philosopher's stone has many meanings. It can be the enlightenment, it can be Odin itself, it can be our spirit monad. But if we speak only at the physical level, the philosopher's stone can be obtained within our own bodies. And this is one level of addressing and working with the runes.
And here's my little take on the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life.
Okay.
Is that I don't think it is a physical one thing or even a spiritual one thing. That my understanding of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life is the entire process of spiritual growth and spiritual evolution. That it's not the destination, it's the journey. And that the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life is the journey of spiritual evolution. You will never actually reach the end of it. There is no ending to it. There is no point where you can suddenly wake up and go, now I'm perfectly enlightened. I'm perfectly illumined. I don't need to do any more work. There's never that point. It is a continuous state of one awakening after the other, after the other, after the other. And it's that pursuit, which is the stone.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for this answer. And from where this pursuit do you think it comes from us? What is this inner calling that drives us to better ourselves?
I wish I knew. In some places, I think the lore tells us this. The Norse lore tells us this. The Western esotericism tells us this, that there is some entity that goes around by many different names, Odin in the Norse tradition, that has the ability to poke people's minds, to poke people's souls, to awaken them to be more of the possibility than they are limited to themselves. And I'm going to talk about a crazy concept that I've been taught by my own guides, my whisperers on this one. But I think this entity just goes around and says, hey, there's more. You can wake up, and this could be there. What I have come to understand in my own personal experience on this one, I've seen it with other people, is throughout your life, there's an alpha point, let's just say, where you wake up. There's an awakening, like, hey, there is this work that can be doing. There is a such thing as enlightenment. There is a spiritual growth path. Wow, what is this one? I want to explore it. Then there is the omega point, when you actually achieve like a higher state of transcendence, when you achieve coherence, and you move into a timeless state of being. Usually this happens after the death of the body, but it can happen before the death of the body. But in this omega state, your soul moves into a timeless state. This is what we call the higher self. And the Lord calls the Själfer mer, out of self to the self, right? That's the self to the self. Now, because you're omega point, you are existing in a timeless state of existence. And its existence is dependent upon the work that you did between the alpha and the omega. You, as the omega high-level being, go back to that alpha point, poke yourself and say, hey, wake up. I need you to start doing this work. And you serve as your own guide, your own filya throughout the entire life to get you to the omega point. Because your life is a continuum at that, instead of a series of events, it is now a continuum of existence.
Yeah, and it's I believe it's no coincidence at all that you spoke about the Själfer mer, because today I worked with this Gauder. And I picked this day to work with this Gauder.
Perfect.
Not other days, this day. And I work with this Galder on pranayama. There is offering yourself to yourself. Wow, I think this is the biggest initiation that anyone can get, and it has so many layers, this offering.
In fact, if we go back to, is it the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu and Arjuna having their discussion, and Vishnu is telling Arjuna that there are 3 levels of sacrifice. The sacrifice of action, where you go and you do things and you help people out. The sacrifice of inaction, where you are in meditation and you're doing your inner working. And he says the 3rd form of sacrifice, which is the greatest and the most powerful of sacrifice, is sacrifice of the self to the self. Giving over the lower self to the higher self, the Atman to the Brahman. And I believe that is exactly what the Lord means with Själva
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And this is a beautiful realization. It's like the Tattvamasi. You are that, basically.
Exactly.
We have here a small question, I think, from Authentic Spirituality. This is another friend of ours that he has also a channel, and he bashes strongly New Age teachings. Here on this channel, we also bash New Age bullshit quite much.
Nice.
But we are not focused on this. No. But on the side, we bash New Age bullshit from time to time. So hello from truth. Would like to hear both of your views on physical immortality in Hinduism? Well, I don't see myself as an exponent of Hinduism. And physical immortality, I think we spoke about this prior to you coming here. And it's not so important as the actual spiritual realization. Oh, but what is your take on this?
I have found I'm a very practical, pragmatic realist. I'm still a skeptic in every way. Even the work that I do, I test it, I validate it, I try to prove it. And to this day, I have not seen any proof of anything of physical immortality whatsoever. And so embedded throughout my teachings, a little bit of the subversive goal that I have is I ask myself, what would you do for this practice if you didn't have a body? For example, we talk about breathing in energy. You take a breath to breathe in energy. You breathe the energy up from the lower to the higher. You do the sound so that you can gulder the runes. But what if you no longer had lungs? What if you no longer had vocal cords? You found that you still existed, but you could still do the gulder work. And so I try to teach people to move to the point where they're no longer needing the physical body, that they're working with their spiritual being more and more so that when the time comes that they find that they are no longer with a body, they're capable, they're competent, they know what they're doing, and that they have achieved a spiritual immortality. And I'm going to diverge from so many other groups. I don't think there is such thing as guaranteed spiritual immortality. I think you've got to do your work while you're alive. You've got to do your processing here and now. That way you can continue on. You can expand the continuum of your existence beyond the physical life. And to me, spiritual immortality is far more important than physical immortality.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. And what you said about what from this technique and practice can you use without the physical body, it's amazing, this idea, because it's very pragmatical. You know, as a soul or as a spirit leaving the body, you will be utterly confused if your only conditioning will be based on techniques applied to the body.
Correct.
You'll be utterly lost. So then there are indeed some techniques in which, for example, in the Perishu approach, you learn how to create with the runes a spiritual embryon that you would inhabit after death, for example. This is also a practice of Qigong, of Taoism. And also, as I see it, when we think, when we have emotions, everything we do inside, the movements of our attention, and this is my personal opinion, I have not really seen it otherwise, but this is just a subjective opinion. When we move, even when we move the attention, there is sound at a very spiritual level being produced.
Yes.
And the galder in itself can be only at the level of our attention, and that's it?
Correct. One of the techniques that I teach people how to tap into the sound at the spiritual level is a very classical technique for setting sacred space, is to imagine that there is a bubble of white light surrounding you, that you're breathing and feeling and experiencing this bubble of white light. Then expand that bubble of white light to fill the space around you, knowing that you're in a sacred space filled with this white light. Now I'm going to turn that and say that you imagine you've got a singing bowl or a sound of a singing bowl. And instead of white light, you are surrounding yourself with the sound of that singing bowl. And if when you get to a singing bowl and you can do it really hard and it starts making that loud clanging noise, you make that loud clanging noise with that vibration around you to break off any of the parts of your energy that's not you, that you don't want. Then you expand that loud clanging to the room to clear out any of the energies you don't want. Then you bring it back to the smooth, level tone that vibrates throughout the room. And if you do the singing bowl right, you can hear 2 or 3 different levels of tones. There's like a deep and a higher, there's a different overtones. You do the same thing for your room. You feel the lower vibrations, you feel the higher vibrations, clearing and setting sacred space with sound. Now, if you could do it with that, then you can do that with internal silent galdering, and then you could really work with the runes as a silent galder.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because there are multiple levels of galder. You can sing it out loud, in whispering voice, and in a mental level. And there is that other level that I mentioned with your attention. For example, the rishis, when they have the sacred alphabets that the Sanskrit one, for example, it was born with some initiates who contemplated the sounds coming out of their bodies, and that was the alphabet. At least this is how I also see the runes. The runes are emanating from our body non-stop. They also have subtle sounds associated with them. And since you mentioned, for example, Krishna and Arjuna, at one point, Arjuna said to Krishna, Lord, what is with this heat and noise on the battlefield? It's something that it doesn't feel human at all. Something is happening here, very strange. And Krishna turned to Arjuna and said, this is someone activated the Brahmastra. Someone activated a divine weapon, and it was made of sound.
Yep. Sound is powerful.
Sound is very powerful, indeed.
The work of Maria Hvilaug, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, it's Hvilaug. She's done a bunch of YouTube videos and that sort of thing. And hey, Deanna. And she has been an inspiration to me. And I found her stuff about the same time I was coming to the same realizations, that a lot of the words that go untranslated from the Poetic Edda refer to sound and vibration. And I've done my own digging into the Poetic Edda, looking for every reference of gel or gala, which means to sing. There is so many references throughout the lore about sound and vibration, and using the runes and using your mind and connecting with everything at sound and vibration. But there is one very interesting place in the Havamal, I believe it stands at 80, when it talks about coming to the Ginregen and to the gods to speak of the runes. One needs to be silent. So it talks about creating the silence within to connect with the divine. And it's from there you find those sacred resonance patterns that we understand as the runes.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Indeed, it's much like the experience of Odin on Yggdrasil when he looked down in the deep. For me, that was the silence of the mind. He looked down into the Ginnungagap, and the runes appeared from formless existence.
Right, and that's exactly it. That's exactly it. That stanza out of the Havamal, Runar mut tufina, runes must you find, Radna stavna och stora stava, the big strong staves. Erfathi Fimbulthuler, who are colored by the Fimbulthuler, and Gerthu Ginregen, who are carved by the Ginregen. Gin is like the level of existence before the gods existed. It's like a super higher level of existence. And Reagan is the rulers. So these are the high holy rulers that existed before the deities existed. So it was carved by the Ginregen, but Favi Fimbulthulur, colored by the Fimbulthulur. Fimble is what like Fimbulvinter, the great winter, the big, powerful, strong winter. And a Thuler is a sacred singer, the person who sings the sacred songs. So when the runes were colored by the sacred singer, tells us right then and there that the runes are vibratory in nature and that they came into existence in a time, before physical reality ever was conceived.
Yep, indeed. Well, that's why the other cultures throughout all the world put at the beginning of everything the sound as the
Exactly. And that's what I find interesting. I caught this on your video on occult anatomy, and we agree with this one, that the sound that the Norse use as a manifestation formula, alu,
that's
has
sure.
the same phonetics as aum and
Yeah,
hallelujah.
that's so obvious. That's so obvious. That's so obvious. I worked with the tantric mantras since I was a kid, and when I've seen the alu formula, it cannot be otherwise.
Exactly.
Otherwise at all, because the L, for example, the M formula, the M sound, it's called the Bindu sound. It focuses and it transmutes the energy, but the L sound, it's much of the same because L, it's life, it's channeling life.
Yes.
It's almost the same. It's almost the same. And by the way, what I found even more crazy is the fact that I found the Alu chant and formula in the tantric chants. It's one of the petals of the throat. One of the petals of the throat in the Sanskrit system contains the word Alu.
See, it's everywhere.
It's there. I have seen it, and it's in the Mahavidyas, in the Shakta tradition. So those guys who are high initiates in the grammatics and science of the sound, they went there with this.
Absolutely. And
yeah. By the way, very appreciative of the idea of making spirituality practical and testing. That's for sure. That's for sure. That's for sure. What we cannot test and we cannot produce in controlled environments we can be skeptical about it. Very missing in modern spirituality and religious world. That's for sure. But the runes, people, authentic spirituality. So people who work with the science of the sound usually mean business.
Absolutely.
Usually mean business for sure. Yeah.
We do the practical and the testing and that sort of thing. The way I want to really impress upon people is that when you're in the ritual chamber, you are resetting your mindset, you're resetting your belief patterns and the subconscious patterns by the ritual that you're doing in the ritual chamber. But everything that you do in the ritual chamber needs to be reflected by what's going on in the real world. If there's not a connection between ritual chamber and the real world, you're not doing effective working. So what that means is, this is a silly example, but if you're in the ritual chamber and you want to win the lottery, and so you dance around naked with a candle and you're chanting the runes to win the lottery, but you never go out and buy your lottery ticket, you're never going to win.
Yeah.
You're never going to have that success. So if you're in the ritual chamber saying, hey, I am needing to do this kind of work, then you do that. You trust that the runes are doing their thing. And I'll come to the last part of the Havamal, which has a very interesting saying about this. Then when you get to the real world, you are doing the real stuff that you need to be doing based on what you did here. Because that last part of the Havamal, there's a very bad translation of the last part of the Havamal, but I think this bad translation is perfectly describing rune magic. Runes are useful if you use them, needful if you need them. Meaning, if you go into the ritual chamber and you use the runes as a tool for transformation and you trust that they do their job, you let it go. And you don't pine on it. You don't worry about it. You don't fret over it. You just say, hey, the runes are being cast, things are in motion, and I'm going to do my part to make this happen. Conversely, if you're like, I hope this worked. I hope this. Do I need to really put more effort into this? Do I need to be doing this? Am I worrying about this? Am I doing this? You're actually sucking the power out of the work that you just done, and you're taking away from the effectiveness rather than trusting that you use the tool correctly in the right way, and that things are going to come out. Thus, useful if useful, used, needful if needed.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And actually, one needs to become an embodiment of his own magic. There is no separation between myself in the ritual chamber and myself right now.
Correct.
No separation at all. We are manifestations of our own magical will. And this is like one of the goals, to be a manifestation of your own magical will every single time.
Absolutely 100% correct.
Yeah. Guys, please, if you have some more questions, so would you be, are you tired? Can you,
We should start
can you
wrapping up. I've got a couple other things running on.
That's why I asked. That's why that's why I asked. So first of all, guys, ask your questions. We talked about a lot of deep stuff, that's for sure. You can see that he has not only a lot of experience, but he can teach you a lot of deep insight. He can share you a lot of deep insight of practical nature of working with the runes. And I highly recommend you to visit his website, his YouTube channel, and buy his book, because when I buy his book a couple of years ago, I was very happy of that purchase. His book, The Rules for Transformation, in my humble opinion, I put it up there. I mean, if I have like 10 reference books, I wouldn't miss your book in that reference for sure.
Thank you.
That's for sure, because it comes from a place of authenticity, and the techniques, how you build up the galder there. Come on, it makes total sense. And the way you build up the galder makes total sense in comparison with other traditions that practice chanting. So,
right.
So everything you did there in the Rules for Transformation, it's the way in which you download certain informations from certain spiritual realms that are not to be filtered by the logical mind. I have not found that description in the communication with the spiritual world or spirits or entities. I have not found that particular description very often in the books. So you have, even if you written it long ago, it will still have an impact anyway.
Thank you.
That's for sure. Yeah. So I highly recommend you guys buy his book. I did. I'm very grateful to myself to buy his book. Also visit his channel. People can find you on YouTube just typing your name like this.
Yeah, my name will get you access to everything I'm doing everywhere.
Yeah. So please subscribe also to his channel, and I believe that I don't only recommend him. I state that he is one of the guys from which you can really learn stuff. For sure. You have a lot of things to transmit, and I'm very grateful that you accepted our humble invitation here. The majority of people visiting this channel, are practitioners, many of them. And I would love for them to visit also your teachings and to collaborate with you or to learn stuff from you. I'm very much I will be glad for this to happen. So thank you for being the embodiment of the Runemaster for us today. Guys, if you have some last questions or last minute questions, don't be shy, please, before we wrap up, please. Okay?
And I'm always open. Facebook, Instagram, whatnot. Feel free to reach out, ask any questions, thoughts, concerns. Yeah, like, subscribe. This is a great channel. So if you're checking out this program for the first time, I've seen his other programs here. This is some really good stuff here. So like and subscribe to this channel too. It's really good stuff throughout. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, sometimes I'm feeling I'm over generous with some information, but oh wait. Of course he does. Of course he does. Of course he does. Okay, let's see. So Luis is a good friend of mine. We have a small group of studies, and we practice certain. We explore different things when it comes to the runes together.
Nice.
Yeah. It's like a small guild, but it's like more like a group,
I love it. That's great.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on your rune postures?
go for it. I don't personally use them, but I have a weird disconnect with yoga. I do well with Qigong, and I actually do a morning routine with Qigong just about every morning. But when it comes to yoga, I just can't connect with it. And I've tried rune postures and like rune mudras, that sort of thing. Doesn't quite click for me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work for other people. And if it works for you, go for it. Use it to your heart's content. But
yeah, we also have our thoughts about the mudras and the postures. They were nobody can say they were actually practiced by the runic priest or something like this. That's for sure. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. I'm going to have to use this up from the beginning. Yeah, look at if you will. This person is very interested in Galdur and chanting and stuff like this.
Nice.
So yeah. Okay, guys. Once more, thank you for coming here. Hail to you and hail to your gods and your ancestors. And may this transmission or communication be for the betterment of everyone who sees this. And I'm very humbled that you accepted my invitation.
I'm very grateful. This has been a really good experience. Thank you for reaching out and offering me this opportunity. This is really great. And I look forward to doing more with you in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, that's for sure. We can approach some more in-depth subjects if there is, and there will be demand for sure. Anyway, thank you again, and many blessings to you guys. Hail to you. Let me close this up. Blessings.
Hail. Thank you.